Hi, everybody. In this unit, we are going to be talking about energy conversion, and the first topic we're going to talk about is photosynthesis. So, when we talk about photosynthesis, if we look at this word, we kind of want to break it down. So, we literally are talking about the synthesis of a different type of energy using light. But really what we're doing is we're converting light energy into a chemical energy, which is going to be sugar, which plants use for their food. And in whether we eat plants or whether we are eating a steak or a hamburger, we're relying on this process of photosynthesis. So what are we talking about when we talk about photosynthesis? So what we're doing is we're talking about a plant's ability to convert or to turn sunlight, air, and water into a sugar. In most cases, it is glucose. So it's very important that you guys know the overall reaction for photosynthesis and what we need. So we start off with carbon dioxide from the air. We also need water, which the plant will take up through the roots from the ground. And then we'll have light, which is energy, and then also chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is very important. And we'll have, or we'll come up with two products, which is going to be a sugar and oxygen. Now, why is photosynthesis so important? So it's going to be vital for life for two reasons. The first one is that we rely on oxygen because we need it to breathe, and photosynthesis is going to be able to provide us oxygen. So they replenish the air with O2 by going through the process of photosynthesis. Now, I talked about this a little bit earlier on the last slide, but all of our food is going to come directly or indirectly from photosynthesis. So if you're eating corn on the cob, you're obviously directly eating chemical energy that's been made by a plant. Or if you are eating a chicken nugget, that chicken eats the corn and you are now eating the chicken, so you're indirectly benefiting from the process of photosynthesis. Now, before we talk about the actual process of photosynthesis, we need to kind of touch a little bit on light, because photosynthesis uses visible light, the visible light spectrum. And so just a few questions before we get into it, but what are the colors of the visible spectrum? I'm sure you guys at some point in time have heard of Roy G. Biv, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, Roy G. Biv. And so what light does with the help of pigments is they're going to absorb certain frequencies. So keep this question in mind as we go through the lecture. So why do plants or why do leaves look green? Okay, and we'll hopefully answer that question by the end of the lecture. So here is going to be the visible light spectrum. So down here is going to be the measurement of the wavelengths. The wavelength, as it increases, the energy decreases, and as the wavelength decreases, the energy increases. So you can see the colors of the spectrum. Now let's specifically talk about pigments that we find in plants. So the main pigment that we find in plants is going to be chlorophyll. And it's the main pigment in most plants. So light's going to be captured by pigments. That main photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll. So there are different types of chlorophyll A, B, and C. But chlorophyll A is going to be the major photosynthetic pigment, and it's going to be found in all photosynthetic plants, protists, and cyanobacteria. Now, protists and bacteria are not technically plants, and so, but they are able to go through photosynthesis because they contain chlorophyll. So you can see here's a plant cell right here, and we have the chloroplasts, which are going to be the organelles that contain chlorophyll. Now, there are other pigments that plants have, and we have the carotenoids and the anthocyanins. And these are going to be visible when chlorophyll is not being used. So during the autumn, which we are in right now, this is a perfect time for you guys to go out and observe these different pigments. So they're called accessory pigments, and they're going to absorb blue and green wavelengths, and they're going to give a plant a yellow or orange color. Okay. In the fall, temperature is going to cause chlorophyll to break down. So once it reaches a certain temperature, the plant will actually stop producing chlorophyll. And that's when we can see these accessory pigments. So these accessory pigments are always there. It just happens that chlorophyll is going to mask their appearance to us. So the only time we see these accessory pigments are when we don't have chlorophyll, and that's in the fall. So we get those orange and red colors from these carotenoids and the anthocyanins. All right, so plants do not use all colors or wavelengths of light. So if you look at this graph, you can say, or you can tell that plants are only going to use certain wavelengths of light. Okay, so from the blue and from the red. Okay, so that means that they're being absorbed. Okay, the frequency of light between about 450, this blue, okay, light wavelength is being absorbed by pigments. Same thing over here. Okay, so do plants use the green part of the light spectrum? Let's look at the graph. No, they don't. So rather than being absorbed, they're being reflected back. Okay, and that is what our eyes interpret, and that is why plants appear green, okay, because that particular wavelength of light is not being absorbed, okay, the green, and that's why we actually can visualize it, because it's not being absorbed, it's being reflected back, and our eyes are able to see it because of that. All right, so now let's actually go into the process of photosynthesis. So where is it going to occur? So photosynthesis is going to occur inside of the chloroplast for eukaryotic cells. Okay, so this is an image of a eukaryotic chloroplast. Okay, so some important terms that you guys need to look at. So you're going to see the thycaloids. These are these little flat sacs. Then you have a granum, which are going to be the stacks of thycaloids. And then around this is going to be the stroma. And it's kind of a liquid. And I'll tell you my analogy to remember these in a little bit. Now, earlier we talked about that some bacteria are able to go through photosynthesis. Well, if we go back a few units and remember that prokaryotes do not have organelles, which means they do not have chloroplasts, how are they able to go through photosynthesis? And this is because they have chlorophyll that's contained in the membrane of their cell. So even though they do not have chloroplasts that contain chlorophyll, they do have chlorophyll that's in the membranes of their cells. So that's how they're able to go through photosynthesis. All right, so where in the chloroplast does photosynthesis happen? So there's two reactions. The first one is going to be a light reaction, and then we call it light dependent sometimes. You're also going to hear the dark reactions or light independent. Now, we say dark because it doesn't require light to happen, but it doesn't actually happen in the dark. So here is a chloroplast. So remember the mitochondria and the chloroplast are double membraned organelles. They're the only two. And within the chloroplast, some important parts. So we're going to see the thycaloids, which are these individual stacks or flattened sacs. Then thycaloids together are called the granum. And then around or inside of the chloroplast is going to be stroma. So my analogy to remember these are the pancakes, okay, are called thycaloids. A stack of pancake is called the granum, and then the stroma is like the syrup. So I think stroma and syrup. Okay, so it's going to surround the granum. So the light reactions are going to actually occur in the thylakoid membranes or the granum. And then the dark reactions or the light independent reactions are going to occur in the stroma. Now, where in a leaf or in a plant does this occur? So chloroplasts are going to be found predominantly in leaves, and this is because they have a great surface area and they're also able to move, and so they're going to be able to absorb that light energy that we need for photosynthesis to occur. And it's going to occur in the mesophyll, okay, those mesophilic layers, which are going to be right here. And we'll talk about plant layers later on, but just so you know, kind of give you a preview into where photosynthesis occurs. All right, so what is the equation? Again, we've went over this a little bit. So we need water and we need CO2. So we get water from the ground, so the plant's going to absorb water from the ground, and it's also going to take in atmospheric carbon dioxide into the leaves. So we need water and we need carbon dioxide in order for this process to occur. Now we need chlorophyll, which we find in the chloroplasts, and then we also need light energy, which comes from the sun. So the ultimate source of energy for everything really is the sun. Once we go through the process of photosynthesis, we're going to end up with glucose, which is C6H12O6, and we also end up with oxygen. So you can see down here, this is kind of the chemical reaction, and down here it puts it in words. So we need water, carbon dioxide, and our products are going to be sugar, glucose, and oxygen. All right, so let's break apart the two different processes that happen in photosynthesis. We're really going to oversimplify this because this is just a high school biology class. If you take a class in college, you will go in greater detail. But for our means, we're just going to keep it pretty simple. So there's two main parts of photosynthesis. We have the light reactions and we have the dark reactions. Now, the light reactions are dependent on light, so it only happens when light is present. What's happening in the light reactions? Well, water is being split apart and oxygen is being released, and this is where we get oxygen released into the atmosphere. This is also called photolysis. And in the light reactions, the chlorophyll molecules are needed to capture that light energy. So we have to have the means to capture the energy from the sun, and the chlorophyll is responsible to do this. After the light reactions occur, we will then go into the dark reaction. It does not require the presence of light. Now, can this still occur in the light? Yes, it just doesn't need light to occur. Now we have CO2 that's going to be fixed. And fixed is kind of just like in this case, it's just another term for rearrangement. And that'll make sense, more sense as we get into the process of the dark reactions. Again, you guys, you're also going to hear it called light independent, or sometimes you'll also hear it called the Calvin-Benson cycle. So just be aware that those are all interchangeable terms. All right, so let's first talk about the light reaction. So again, the first two stages are going to be light reactions and dark reactions. Light reaction just means that we need that sunlight for it to occur. So throughout the presentation of the lecture, I've tried to include as many pictures and images because then for me, it's much easier to understand, and hopefully it is for you. So what's happening in this image is we have light from the sun, we have water. We're going to go through this process of the light reactions. Well, what do we get out of the light reactions? So we're getting oxygen, and we have NADPH and ATP. Now, these are energy storage molecules. So once we take the light and we are going to need something to carry it. So we need these storage molecules. So sometimes I like to think of them as the bus, okay? So they're going to carry that energy, and they're going to drive that bus into the dark reaction. Now, this is where CO2 is going to enter into the process. What do we get out of the dark reactions? So this CO2 and this hydrogen are going to be fixed. They're going to rearrange so that we get a sugar. C6, which is where we get the carbon, C6, H12O6, the hydrogen, and then the oxygen. All right, so again, you guys, photosynthesis is going to begin with the light reactions. Chlorophyll is going to absorb that light energy, and then that energy is going to be transferred or stored into two molecules, ATP and NADPH, okay? These are then going to go into our dark reaction, okay? So we have light energy in, water in, and what do we get out of the light reactions? We get ATP, NADPH. These are going to store energy. The oxygen is released into the air. It does not go into the dark reaction. And then we have the hydrogen. Now, where did the hydrogen and the oxygen come from? Well, they came from the water. And where did these come from? Well, these came from the dark reactions. So these actually cycle between the light and the dark, between the light and the dark. Now we're going to head into our dark reactions. So we're going to take our products from the light reactions, which is the ATP and the NADPH, and we are going to add in our carbon dioxide. Now, the dark reactions, or light independent, or the Calvin cycle, they're all exactly the same thing. What's going to happen in this reaction? So basically, we're taking our hydrogen and we're bringing in CO2 and we're rearranging, or we're fixing it to get a sugar molecule, okay? So we take that CO2, that energy that's temporarily stored in ATP and NADPH, this hydrogen is going to combine with this CO2 or be fixed into a sugar. So that's really what's happening in the dark reactions, is we're taking ingredients, we're taking a carbon, we're taking an oxygen, we're taking a hydrogen, and we're kind of mixing them together like you would in a recipe to get our final product. In this case, it's going to be that building block for sugar. So again, you guys, lots of really good images. If I were you, I'd print these images out because they're pretty good. So this image is my favorite one. It's very simple, very easy to look at. So it's separated into our light reactions and our dark reactions. Again, remember, when we say dark, it doesn't occur in the dark. It just doesn't need light. So and you will need to know the reactants and the products of each stage. So what do we need for them for each stage to start? So we need water for the light reaction, and we need light. Okay, and what do we get out of it? So after the light reactions occur, oxygen is then going to leave. Where did our hydrogen go? Well, it's going to be stored in NADPH. That's where hydrogen from the water went. Then we're going to go into our light independent, or the Calvin cycle. We're going to add CO2. So what do we need for the Calvin cycle to start? We need CO2, we need ATP, and NADPH. Now we're going to go through the Calvin cycle, and we're going to use this hydrogen, we're going to use this carbon, and we're going to use this oxygen to make our sugar. Now what happens to ATP? Well, we turn into ADP, we lose a phosphate, and we've lost that hydrogen because we're using it in our sugar, so now it's just NADP. And the NADP and ADP, will cycle back and forth throughout. But we need more oxygen, or we need more water and light for it to occur. And actually, water and light will cause this to actually happen faster. So the more light and the more water you have, it will drive it to a certain point. All right, so let's just do a little overview. So what happens? So we're taking light energy, we're converting it to chemical energy, so ATP and NADPH, and we're producing that oxygen, which leaves the cell and goes into the atmosphere. Then we have our light-independent reactions. So it's going to use the ATP and the NADPH that we created, or we didn't create, but we are using from the light reactions. Then it's going to take that hydrogen from NADPH, take this hydrogen right here, and then it's going to take this CO2, and it's going to form that sugar, which is going to be the building block for all different types of products. Again, here's another image that we saw at the beginning. It's just telling you what we need, what comes in, and what comes out. And then the last one kind of shows you kind of a molecular look at it. So we have our carbon dioxide, our water, we need that light energy, and then our products are going to be glucose and oxygen. I know this is confusing. If you guys are still having problems, rewatch the lecture, print out these images, and if you guys need any help, you always can email me, Skype me, Zoom me, call me, and we'll get it figured out.